Hi everyone. Today markets had a bit of a waterfall sell-off, really aggressive first candle down right to the level 607.03. If you had it on the chart, the low there was 607.02. So we touched it right to the penny, and then we got the bounce from there almost back to the 610 level. The high there was 610.70, so we missed it by just a few pennies. So pretty good trading actually. Sell-off here, found support, rallied back to the level. 21 EMA. Are we going to reject from here and sell a little bit more? Let's take a look at the charts and see if we can find some direction. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. In news today, we got Palantir announcing changes to their share sales plan and a Pentagon budget cut, and the shares were down 12%, down a little bit more here today, 1.7%. We'll take a look at the chart a little bit later, but big sell here from Palantir. You could definitely argue this was a very expensive company and it was never going to stay at these levels, but down 8% from the Pentagon, which is where they get most of their money from the US government. And they also said the CEO is planning to sell 10 million shares over the next 6 months. So again, these two things together led to a big sell in Palantir shares. Then looking at fear and greed, stepped down to a 45 from a 48. Not too much there. Fear on momentum, strength rolling down. We talked about that yesterday. Extreme fear there. Breadth, still no movement, neutral on that. Put call ratio was very low, 0.63. That is typically about as low as it gets. You can see 0.62, 0.63. That's usually the bottom, and then you see rallies from there. Extreme greed on that indicator. Volatility stepping up, safe haven demand tanking, so you got bonds doing well while equities are not doing great. We've been saying that for a long time. That's been the play. And then junk bonds still in greed, no movement there either. Quick look at stock market seasonality. Don't forget this is a bearish period. We are expecting about 2 to potentially 3% negative on the month based on seasonality, and that can be quite a lot, up to 5% if you include this plus 2% here, down to minus 3% to close out the month. So pretty big potential down move based on seasonality to close out the month. Moving over to the economic calendar, you can see continuing jobless claims slightly better than expectation. Initial jobless claims slightly worse, nothing crazy. Philly Fed a little bit lower than expectations. Leading index also quite negative. Interesting there. 30-year tips went up quite a lot. 2.4 versus 2.05. Interesting to see that as well. Inflation coming back potentially over the next couple of years. Obviously, these are 30-year tips, but they factor in short-term inflation after the hot CPI reads we got. And then you got Fed balance sheet selling off about 30 billion. Pretty substantial sell there. They have been doing this for a long time and markets really haven't reacted to it too much. And then for tomorrow, you got another set of economic factors. Pretty decent expectations. Want to see all of these come in above the 50 line, 53 expectation for services PMI, 51.3 for manufacturing PMI. Want to see those come in well. And then you got existing home sales tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Fairly interesting there. Again, want to see these continue to stay at least stable, no major tanks as we start to see the changes come from the federal government. Moving over to max pain for tomorrow, still 601. Total options, 3.7 million. Put call ratio came down just a smidgen there, 3.37. Either way, 605 makes sense. 602 is kind of the put wall. 610 is the call wall. So we're still at the high end of the range, in my opinion. I think there's a little bit more downside. 605 would make sense. 605 to 610. So half, maybe 0.75% lower based on this chart. Moving over to the charts, looking at the S&Ps, we were down about 0.5%. We had the really powerful close the previous day, well above that 610 level, and then we broke down here today right to the trend. Was the candle open, and then we sold from there all the way down to support like we talked about. Momentum stepping down, RSI stepping down. You can see this kind of rising wedge formation here. Tried to overthrow. We're back into the middle of it now. If this zone here breaks around this 607 area and we start to push lower, then I'd be looking for a move down back to that 599.64 level in here. You also got the 55 EMA hanging out in there, so critical zone. Ultimately, usually this ends up bearish with the rising wedge pattern. And this start now with the breakdown, a little bit of selling after hours makes sense that this is probably going to culminate lower. We'll see how it plays out. Right now, it makes sense to be a little lower. And you can see it on that hourly chart. The big breakdown here, bounce to the level, retracing to the downside after hours. Does not look super great. So we'll see. Right now, it's holding in there. But there is certainly potential that this breaks down a little bit lower. And like we talked about in the max pain numbers, 605 to 610 makes sense. You got the level 607, probably going to come into here. Is that where we're going to finish? Hard to say, but it would make sense for that max pain finish on this third week options expiration. Then moving over here to the Tasty charts, you can see that dip low, hit that lowest band. As you would expect, we found a little bit of a bounce from there back to the mid-range. Mid-range selling off. You can see it here, 8 EMA at 609.67. If it sells back off, you can see the low of that band would be right in that same range. It probably would sell off a little bit as you got closer to it, and then maybe come to here, 606, somewhere in that level like we talked about, 607 on the previous charts. And you can also see bearish conditions here now with this high, lower high, ATR trailing stop right here at that 612.19 area. As long as we stay below that, it's going to be short-term bearish. And my guess is that's probably going to last a little bit here with this pretty substantial lower low from these previous lows. Moving over to the NASDAQ, down 0.42, back below the level 538.28. You can see we touched my level here. 533.17 was the level. We touched it, was the high back here, was the low here, also held the trend. Momentum still stepping down, volume ramping a little bit. Basically all the same features that we saw on the previous chart. Still expecting it to go a little bit lower, still looks like a topping pattern here. But you can also see on the short time frame, bounce here, rally to that 21 EMA, that's resistance at 537.36. Seems to be holding up okay in the after hours, finishing this kind of 533 to 536 area makes sense for me. Momentum bullish, volume came through at the end of the session, which was slightly bullish as well. So it's not completely broken, but definitely looks weaker today than it did yesterday. Moving over to the Qs, this has actually stayed bearish here on the Tasty charts. You can see bearish conditions, ATR trailing stop continues to step down. Current trailing stop is at that 539.52 area. So at this point, expecting it to reject off there, even if we get a little bit of a rally. We hit the lowest band, we're at the mid-range here. Would expect this to continue to sell at least double bottom or higher low setup, so expecting at least one more down move. Then we'll see what happens. Does it cut through here, or is this just a short-term retracement on the way to higher highs? Certainly doesn't look like it on the short time frames, at least in my opinion. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, both of these sold off pretty substantially. We did get that kind of accumulation of EMAs. We tested it and sold off, down almost 1% here. Touched that 144 EMA and bounced. Touched these lows here and bounced. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish. We're still in the same kind of trading range. We said the 55 was resistance. We're still expecting that. But we've been here for a long time. Mid-December, we're still here mid-February. Structurally, we haven't broken this trend yet either. That's around the 222.50 area. The momentum's not great. The RSI is not great, but for now, structurally okay. Starting to look a little bit worse though. And then looking at the Dow, much worse here as well. You can see this kind of consolidation. Big sell below these structures. Got the support at 441.43. Touched that level, bounced a little bit. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish, volume coming through. 432.78 is the level. If this structure here breaks, you can see that low here, and then the 55 there at 438.22. Realistically, I think there's quite a bit more to this, 2, maybe 3.75% down potentially. Moving over to the Mag 7, sell-off day here as well, 0.7. We're holding that 55 EMA, that's at 323.15. Technically, we closed below it by about 15 cents. After hours selling a little bit more. Next level around here, 316.90. But if we break that 55 EMA tomorrow and we hold below it, then I'd be looking for 315.04. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish. If the Mag 7 starts to roll here, that is going to be a major downward indicator for markets. We've been consolidating for a long time, and it seems like we might be in that major topping pattern. We've been talking about it for a long time, but we've been sideways chopping. Is this the moment we start to see those bigger sells? Moving over to Palantir here just for a moment, you can see big down day there, 10% down, and then another 5% today. Got much lower, 21 EMA there at 98.65. I mean, if you looked at this chart and you thought this is going to continue on forever, sorry. It's just not how the markets work. You can see we rallied super aggressive from $20 all the way up to $120. Definitely should have been taking profits. I would have taken profits a lot sooner. Even if I got in here, you had pretty nice consolidation. You had a level break here around that 27. Once you held above 27, then you had a really strong run from there. But it's probably done now. Probably going to look for some gap fills, probably down to the 83 area. That's what I would be looking for. Momentum super bearish, volume coming through on that selling. Makes sense that they're trying to sell some shares. The stock is super expensive. The volume is all the way down here at $36. Again, gap fill 55 EMA would be my initial target to the downside. 82.95. If we touch that level, maybe you get at least a short-term bounce, but I would think this kind of longer-term rally is probably done in the short term. Moving over to Apple and Microsoft, Apple managed to find some positive buyers here. You can see about $1 higher, nothing crazy. Momentum flattening out, RSI flattening out. We'll see if this can continue. I would expect that it can't, but at least for now, still staying positive, selling a smidgen after hours. And then you got Microsoft up 1/3%, almost got to this EMA consolidation at 421.27. That was kind of the initial target in here, 422, somewhere in there. Momentum still bullish, still looks okay, held the level 413.36 on a test, so as long as that continues to hold, this is slightly bullish for me, and it is continuing to do so, looking for a test of this zone, 422, maybe as high as 425. Moving over to Tesla and NVDA. Tesla was down about almost 2%, just short of it, back below the 355.03 level by a few pennies. So for me, that's a little bit bearish. We're back below the level. I would expect it to continue lower once we got that level break. You could argue maybe this is still holding, but I would say it's not. And then looking at NVIDIA here, you can see positive 0.63 on the day. High of day missed my level, 140.76 by just 10 cents there. Momentum stepping back towards bearish. We got a flat momentum move there. RSI still flat. This is still resistance for me, 140.76. I am expecting this to reject from here. And so far that is still holding as a potential zone of resistance. Moving over to Meta and Broadcom, both of these sold off here a little bit more today. Meta came down to that 21 EMA. That was the initial target. That was 693.82 here today. We touched that level, held that level, selling a little bit. Momentum still bearish, RSI still bearish. Looks very similar to the Palantir chart, almost straight up movement, very extended, got a burst candle, and then we rejected, engulfing candle, big sell. Next level would be the trend line here around 680, and at this point I would expect it to cut through there. We might find a bounce, kind of chop sideways in here, wait for this to consolidate and then sell, but doesn't look super great for me. I think this rally is just about done. And then looking at Broadcom here, down almost 1% as well, throwing a wick to VWAP, still holding this structure. You got trend support here, 221, 222, somewhere in here. 55 EMA there, 219.47. Once this structure breaks, I'm expecting this to sell pretty dramatically, but for now, it's holding up, and I think this is really kind of the overall thesis we've been seeing. We're starting to see those bigger signs of selling. You have some structures that need to break yet, and once they do, we're going to see a bigger sell across the board. Moving over to staples and discretionaries, we got staples down about 1/3% through a big wick to support at 80.54, touched the level and bounced. Momentum still stepping down, RSI still holding in here, structurally still okay, and then looking at discretionaries, continues to sell, down almost 1%. After hours catching a little bit of a bounce. Interesting. We'll see if that ends up holding up here. But just looking at this chart does not look great. You can see low, slightly higher low, but you have a high, much lower high, much lower high. Retest 21, selling off. I would expect this to go through here. Momentum stepping back to bearish, RSI looking bearish. So overall, not so great. Still looks risk off for me. Moving over to 20 and 50-day breadth, you can see we threw wicks to the downside, but ended up holding here on 20-day. Either way, the structure is just about the same, right? So we got the breakdown, looking for the retest of the 21. It's failing a little bit early, not a great sign there. And then you got 50-day, same thing as yesterday, right at this double top, starting to see a little bit of selling from there. Momentum stepping down, RSI stepping down. For me, this says we should be going a little bit lower. We'll see if we get the follow through tomorrow. Moving over to the dollar here, we got the dollar selling off pretty aggressive. So we hit that 9 EMA yesterday. We said that could be a zone of resistance here around that 107.4 area. And then we got the major rejection down almost 1% on the day. The dollar is selling off really, really aggressive. With this level break here, you should expect 105.5 as your next zone in here. That's what I would be looking for. Momentum bearish, RSI bearish. And once we get into this zone here, potentially we get to those oversold conditions and then we find a little bit of a bounce. Either way, on the medium term, this is still a low, potentially higher low, maybe double bottom in here. Structurally still bullish for me. Once we as long as this 105 holds. If it breaks through there, then you're looking at the 200 at 104.9. If that breaks, obviously that's going to be significant and a much more bearish outlook here for the dollar. But for now, it looks kind of short-term bearish, maybe medium-term, but long-term not so much quite yet. Moving over to JNK and TLT, both of these did well on the day. 0.07 and 0.37 continuing to hold this structure. We said this was kind of a low, higher low setup. So far, so good. Continuing to hold in this zone. Still got the 55 as resistance and that 89.16 level as resistance, but either way, medium to long term, still like bonds here. I've been saying it forever, still true for me in this area. Moving over to the VIX. VIX spiked up a little bit, continuing to hold in the same region. Momentum swinging to bullish, RSI swinging to bullish. Honestly, I would have expected this to go a little bit higher with the price action that we saw today, but either way, expecting this to go a little bit higher now for me. 17.3, 17.4 in here, maybe next level 18.5. Either way, it looks like a consolidation low, looking for a little bit of a swing higher here on the VIX. Moving over to my accounts, it says I made a little bit of money, but I don't think that that's true. We got the after hours for the Qs going up about 50 cents. I think that's factoring in the 50 cents there. So either way, relatively unchanged on the day for me. Covered call coming in clutch, covering all of those losses, and then some. Should be in good position here. Max profit, no change. Obviously, I didn't move my position at all. So that's going to be 542.50. And then looking at the Russell, I rolled down here to 224 for tomorrow's session. It's basically unchanged after hours. Got a dollar credit, so 225 is the max profit there. Looking for about 70 cents on tomorrow's session. Again, the structure is not super bullish. Can absolutely roll out early in the session if we start to show a ton of bullishness. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, so I'm playing a little defensive. You can see I was down $65 on the day, whereas the shares were down about $215. So I did actually roll down intraday, get a little bit more credit, and was able to defend pretty well on a day where the market was down about 1%. Overall pretty good, but still being defensive as we go into options expiration tomorrow. Let me know down in the comment section what you thought of Palantir or any of the markets today. Does it shift your perspective? How much lower do you think we're going? Let me know. Otherwise, like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video. Make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.